Hi, I'm Billy Joel. You guys remember me?
Billy Joel, completely retold. Welcome to today's edition of It's Still Billy Joel to Me, the official live stream of Billy Joel, completely retold, the group on Facebook, where it's always 9 o'clock on a Saturday. I got something special for you guys today. It's going to be a little longer episode, a lot of reading. But like I said, a couple weeks ago, I was going through a tub of my Billy stuff, found all my old articles and magazines and stuff like that I've been collecting when I went on a spree on eBay back in the 90s. And so I'm going to show you something very special. This is got an article I'm going to read today. But this is September 4th, 1980 issue of Rolling Stone magazine. You can see there, Billy Joel is angry. In this gutsy interview, he attacks almost everybody by Timothy White. So I'm going to be careful with this. It's not a good condition to begin with anyway, so I'm not worried about ruining it, but I am not going to try and rip any pages if possible. So what I'll do here, I've got some pictures. I'm not going to hold up the individual pages to show you, but I took some photos, and I'm going to post those in the museum once this goes live, okay? So I'm just going to start reading the article here. It's Billy Joel is angry. Dated Rolling Stone, September 4th, 1980. In a gutsy interview with Rolling Stone, the Glass House superstar throws a few stones of his own. His nose was lying on its side, bleeding on a swollen cheek. Billy Joel studied himself in the mirror. His thoughts darted back to the solid punch that had numbed his face for the rest of the bout, held as usual at a boys' club gym in the Hicksville, Long Island shopping center. Before the amateur welterweight had another minute to dwell on his disfigurement, a buddy ambled by, sized up his mushed mug, and calmly said, "It's just cartilage. It'll be okay." Then this guy pushed Joel's nose back into what seemed to be its former position. Later, a little surgical tape and gauze held the damage in place. "My nose was never the same after that," says Joel, who won 23 of his 26 bouts during a 3-year period in his mid-teens. "I've got one nostril smaller than the other. See, my nose is kind of bent. I thought about having an operation, but I wondered if it would change my voice. Now I kind of like it," he says of his altered appearance. "I don't know if I'd want to look like I did when I was a kid. As my mother would say, it gives you character. In other words, hey, no big deal, okay?" Billy Joel, 31, has been defensive most of his life, often with good reason. His father, a Jew born in Nuremberg and raised in Nazi Germany, divorced his wife during Billy's adolescence and left for Vienna, reducing the family's economic standing from lower middle class to scrambling for rent status. "My father never abandoned us," Joel insists. "He sent a check every month. But when pressed," the cautious, ever-sparing pop star adds, "well, my mother took any gig she could get. Bookkeeper, secretary. We went hungry a lot. Sometimes it was scary not eating. We were in the suburbs in Levittown, but we were the antithesis of suburban situation. Do you know what it's like to be the poor people on the poor people's block?" And we've seen that house in Meeting Lane. To shield himself against a Long Island suburban ethos that ridiculed his threadbare circumstances, Joel fell into a neighborhood gang, wore a leather jacket, sniffed glue, dabbled in petty theft, and drank a lot of Tango wine, easily the toughest belly wash for a macho young pug to keep down. He was always angry, yeah, but for the anger fed his hunger, and his hunger found its focus in music. His mother dragged him to piano lessons at the age of 4, hoping he would emulate his father, a classical pianist whose love for music and life helped him survive a stretch in Dachau during World War II. Howard Joel escaped to New York via Cuba and became an engineer for General Electric. Billy Joel quit Hicksville High and escaped into rock and roll. Or so he thought. What initially seemed like a release soon proved to be a snake pit, and Joel was bitten badly as he stumbled from group to group, label to label, viper to viper. Even after he landed a deal with a reputable label, Columbia, the financial returns were paltry. Desperate, he turned to his wife Elizabeth, who had previously been married to the drummer of one of Joel's early bands, the Hassles, and begged her to use the know-how she'd acquired at UCLA's Graduate School of Management to pull him out of his predicament. He maintains that as late as the summer of 1978, Joel's debut platinum album for CBS Piano Man had netted him only $7,763. Reputed to be a tough businesswoman, Elizabeth, 32, initiated a flurry of lawsuits, took charge of Joel's books, and fought to get her hapless husband his fair share of the profits by setting up their own corporation, Home Run Systems. "This is a business," she has stated. "People never expected me to be as smart as I was, and they would be totally frank because they didn't realize I was building my empire. Money is the bottom line of everything." Secure in the knowledge that he is finally in good hands monetarily, Joel now pays attention only to his music. After a decade of bar bands, indecent record deals, and disdainful press, he presented Columbia Records with the biggest album in its history, 1978's The Stranger, which has sold more than 5 million copies to date. On stage, during a 3-encore performance at Detroit's Joe Louis Arena in late July, Joel was raucous and riveting as he raced from keyboard to keyboard on his multi-ramp set, pressing his fine band Russell Javers rhythm guitar, David Brown lead guitar, Doug Stegmeyer bass, Richie Canada horns and organ, and drummer Liberty DeVito, a veteran of Mitch Ryder's early groups, to its limits. Billy seemed as pugnacious as his face-off stance suggested when he spit out "It's still rock and roll to me," openly taunting the critics who dismissed him as a mere pop phenomenon. But it's important to look past the pose, to read between the lyrics lines and recognize his urgency and boyish fear of rejection. He's very disciplined, says Ramon. All the digs he gets in the press really hurt him, said producer Phil Ramone, who Joel willingly admits turned his career around with his studio expertise on The Stranger, 52nd Street, and Glass Houses, the last 3 of his 7 albums. "He's very disciplined," says Ramone. The band and I, generally get along done in just 2 or 3 takes, and it's all part of his tough, seasoned exterior, born out of years of double crosses, but behind his hard facade is a great, great tenderness. I think, for example, that I took some of the rigid perfectionism out of his classical training and made "Just the Way You Are" less like a stiff nightclub ballad and more like a powerful, deliberate love statement. With a backward samba. What's a samba? This interview with Billy Joel took place in his room at the Hotel Pontchartrain following the Detroit performance. Dressed in a droopy red t-shirt, sneakers, and jeans, he lounged in a couch and cajoled me into helping him empty 2 bottles of Dewar Scotch. He talked nonstop from 1 a.m. until dawn. At first, he came off randy and offhanded, but as he grew more tranquil, I thought back on a story he told me 3 years earlier about his maternal grandfather, who became his surrogate father after Billy's dad left the family. "He was an English gentleman," Joel had said, "a brilliant man who inspired me to read, and he was a music lover. We would go to the Brooklyn Academy of Music to see these great classical performances, and because he knew the guy at the door, he'd slip him a pack of Camels to get us good seats." He was, Joel assured me then, his voice cracking, a real gentleman. I reminded Joel that recollection and asked him how he saw his current stage of personal development. "Part of me is an adult," he said quietly, rubbing his crooked nose, "and part of me is a kid. I want to hold on to both very much. You once told me that the image on the cover of The Stranger, you on a bed in a suit and tie, staring at a mask, boxing gloves hanging nearby, came to you in a dream. There's something surreal about the cover of Glass Houses, too. What's the story behind that? The mask actually had nothing to do with the song The Stranger, where I talk about faces, the sides of ourselves that we hide from each other. The Glass Houses jacket was the same kind of thing. I keep thinking, exasperated, well, I suppose people think of me as a pop star. Right up to this second, I remain uncomfortable with that tag. That rock star thing, that was not the purpose of making the latest record. I'm going to do whatever I feel like doing, and whatever I do, I know I'm going to get rocks thrown at me. So I figured, what the hell? I'm just going to throw a rock through my own window at myself. Meaning the whole narrow image people have of me. Smiling. And that is my house, by the way. People think I've got this multi-million-dollar mansion. I paid $300,000 for it, and that wasn't even money up front. I've got a mortgage. Not a multi-millionaire. Frankly, I'm not really sure what I'm worth. Look into it, Billy. It's safe to say I'm a millionaire. Thanks, that's a possibility. I honestly don't know and don't ask. If you could go back and tell him. Does having a mortgage mean you couldn't buy the home outright? Yes, I couldn't do that. Even though you're one of the largest sellers of records in recent years, it sounds as if you should be renegotiating your contract with Columbia Records. Well, I can't turn around now and renegotiate something I've already agreed to. That's my concept of good business. And I admit, I did sign a lot of lousy papers over the years. Are you content overall with the situation? It was more fun when there were a lot less dollars involved and a lot less greed. And there was a lot less pressure to make mega bucks. And I had fewer responsibilities to people. I tend to get pissed off about money, and that's why I have lawyers and managers to keep it fairly distant from me. It used to be fun to just go out and play rock and roll. What was the first record that really turned your head around, influenced you? You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin' by the Righteous Brothers, and almost every record the Ronettes did. Their sound was bigger than the radio. To me, Phil Spector was like composer Richard Wagner. Any song by Otis Redding, Sam and Dave, Wilson Pickett, early Motown. See, when I was 12 or 13, I didn't have any money. My sister had a little record case for 45s that said, "I love you, Elvis," on the side. And I'd sneak into and borrow what she had. The singles had no photos on them, so you didn't know whether the groups were white or black. You speak of your reverence for black R&B, but I think it's fair to say that your sound is a lot closer to white pop. That's probably because I'm white. The closest I can get to sounding black might be something near Stevie Winwood. You know, I really wanted Ray Charles to record New York State of Mind, and I approached Al Green with some stuff. I loved Streisand doing New York State of Mind, and Sinatra just did Just the Way You Are, but the biggest kick was when Ronnie Spector cut Say Goodbye to Hollywood, because I heard Ronnie in my head as I wrote the lyrics. It was wild. And then to have Miami, Steve Van Zandt, and the E Street Band back her up was the best. God, that made me truly happy. That's jukebox music, man. Good car radio music. And I helped make it happen. Critics who are looking for art in rock and roll or pop are looking for something that doesn't or shouldn't exist there. In my teens, I was in bands with names like Emerald Lords and the Lost Souls. We wore marching jackets with velvet collars. I didn't know from extended guitar solos or that you were supposed to drop this drug while listening to that record and then read the album cover upside down as the record played. I tried being a hippie for a year. It was a total loss. I was a lousy hippie. I became the keyboard player for this band called The Hassles. We put out 2 albums, The Hassles and The Hour of the Wolf. It was real psyche whatever. This was about the time Hendrix was out. His music really got to me, and the Hassles drummer and I decided we were going to do a power duo. It was the loudest thing you ever heard. We made one album for Epic called Attila. I had this weird cover. The art director had us in a meat locker with carcasses hanging around us, and we were dressed up as Huns. I got talked into it. So how'd you become a solo singer-songwriter hiding out in L.A. under the pseudonym Bill Martin and playing Buddy Greco songs in the Executive Cocktail Lounge? Oh, I started writing songs on my own, taking odd jobs in New York in the meantime. I thought, okay, I'm going to be a songwriter and write for other people. I had gotten the whole rock and roll thing out of my system, or so I thought. But everybody in the business told me, if you want other artists to hear your material, why don't you make a record? Once I made the record, they wanted me to go on tour and promote it. So one thing led to another. The first album was called Cold Spring Harbor on Paramount Records. That was a weird deal. The strangest thing happened, said producer Artie Ripp. The 16-track machine ran slow, and when we mixed the final master, Billy sounded like a chipmunk. I said, Billy, it doesn't matter if it's fast or slow, we'll remix it sometime later in our lives. I went on tour and nobody got paid. I signed away everything. I just didn't know. This was right before Piano Man. I went to the West Coast. I just disappeared. I really didn't want to leave, but I had to get out of these contracts with Rip and Paramount, and I didn't want these people to know what I was doing. So I used the name Bill Martin, and I got a gig working on a piano bar for about 6 months. It was all right. I got free drinks and union scale, which was the first steady money I'd made in a long time. I took on the whole alter identity, totally make-believe. I was like Buddy Greco, collar turned up and shirt unbuttoned halfway down. The characters that Steve Martin and Bill Murray do as a spoof. Star Wars! Let's see. I was doing too, only people didn't know I was kidding. They thought, wow, this guy is really hip. Eventually, the people who had me under contract and couldn't find me realized they were either going to have to renegotiate and compromise, or they weren't going to get anything out of me. It was 1972. I was about 23. I still had no idea what a mess this whole business is. Well, I noticed the Family Productions, the company run by Artie Ripp that signed you to Paramount Records, still has Rip's logos, Romulus and Remus, being suckled by that she-wolf on the label of every one of your albums. Do you think that someday you'll ever be free of Rip? Shaking his head in disgust. I don't know. I get $1 from each album I sell. Rip gets 28 cents out of that for discovering me. Once in a while, I get pissed off about it, but until the situation changes, it's not really healthy to dwell on it. I deserve that money a lot more than Rip does, but I signed the papers, so what can I do? What can you do? It was the only way I could get free of his Family Productions, although he wouldn't let me go entirely, and he seems willing to continue to take the money. Do you own your own publishing? I have a deal with CBS, April Blackwood Publishing. I do not own my publishing, but I own my copyrights now, meaning that I own like 50%. Live and learn, eh? Incidentally, I read recently in Random Notes about this guy, John Powers of Reno, who said that I stole his song that he wrote, My Life. I remember this story. Now, my initial instinct is to just go beat the hell out of the guy, but my lawyers say I can't do that. I've had more leeches and sharks preying on me over the years, and it hasn't been dramatized in the press much because, until recently, Billy Joel wasn't very interesting to people. But I never stole somebody's song. People send me tapes through Columbia all the time, and I do not and will not listen to them. As it is, I'm getting sued. I've got lawsuits up the gazool, which is something that disillusions me a lot about writing. I don't want to steal from anyone because I know the feeling. My stuff's been getting ripped off all my life. How have things with my life ended up? Lawyers. It was a settlement. I said, how much am I going to have to pay if we go to court? And the lawyer said, X amount. How much? The guy is wrong. I never heard his song. He wants to take me to court. I'll go to court. I'll kill him. I want to kill him. I'll kill anybody who says I stole his material. Maybe he did have a melody that was copyrighted, but don't tell people I'm a thief. When they question my intentions, that bugs me. Enough about that. I never stole nobody's song. I should clear up the Dakota thing. You know it? No. During the Madison Square Garden gig in July, it came out in the New York Post and the New York Times that I had applied for an apartment in the Dakota, an exclusive Manhattan apartment building, and had been turned down because I admitted to being a drug user and because I had groupies. Number one, I did not want an apartment in the Dakota. My wife did. Elizabeth no longer manages me. She is involved with me, fundraising, movie production, film editing, but she's got 20 other things going. And I said, enough of the stream of being wife and manager. Let's just be man and wife. For a couple more years. There was a rumor that all these things put a strain on your personal relationship. Yeah, I've heard the rumors too. Are you and Elizabeth getting divorced? Are you separated? It's like, what? Give me a break. Everything's fine. You heard it here first. Now tell me about the Dakota incident. It wasn't enough for Elizabeth to apply. I had to appear. This is typical. It's typical of the Equal Rights Amendment not being passed. A wife is considered chattel to her husband. They were worried about me. I showed up in my suit. I went to the interview. I did the Dakota. The man, the heavy guy who was deciding, who's the deciding guy, had the nerve to have me sign albums for his daughter. There had been an interview in Us magazine right before we went to the Dakota interview. So because I had said, once I did this and once I did that, it was picked up in the Times as, he has admitted that he is a drug user. I got a family, you know. I got a mother. I got a sister. I got a father. And the press is calling me a known drug user because I happened to say once I went on stage stoned. Yeah, I'll teach you. Gotta watch what you say in the limelight. It's Gloria Vanderbilt getting turned down at the River House. Ha ha! Isn't it great that the multimillionaire got turned down? I'm not a multimillionaire. People think that I have much more money than I have. I pay high salaries. I am in no way set for the rest of my life. I make a nice living, okay? But I do go into the red on the road. The salaries and the costs of the production, it's a recession, man. I'm like everybody else. I don't make any money at a gig. I go on the road because I like to play. I'm not bitching about it. I'm just constantly behind. Even with full arenas of people paying $12.50 a seat. Sorry, I gotta stop it. If you look at the marketplace, $12.50 is not in line with ticket prices, which tend to run as high as $15 or more. It's a pretty low price, and I do it that way because I want the kids to be able to afford to see the shows. So where do you make your money? Well, for the last 3 years, the revenues have mainly come from record sales. There are several charities you contribute to on a steady base. Which are they? The Rehabilitation Institute in Magnolia, New York, which handles a lot of causes, and the Little Flower School in Suffolk for orphans and kids who are emotionally troubled. There are several others. Incidentally, have you heard the new rumor? It was on the radio today, and I'm retiring. They even had a tribute to me. Unbelievable. Anyhow, go ahead. We've talked before about sharing your wealth and growing up with socialism. Your parents were socialists? No, their parents were. I don't think they were in the party, but that was their philosophy. My grandfather fought in the Abraham Lincoln Brigade in the Spanish Civil War. My mom and dad were registered as Democrats, but they were never less than liberal on their politics. What was the first time you met your dad after he divorced your mother? Do a careful page turn. Last page. I was living in a rented house in the Malibu Mountains in 1972. Soon as he got off the plane, I knew who he was. He's got that same bug eyes. It's very strange. I mean, we look a lot alike in a way. And he's looking at me like, is that what I used to look like? And I'm looking at him like, is that what I'm gonna look like? He's a great piano player in the classic sense, trained by a Prussian. Have you ever been in a working situation together? He's been in recording sessions. He was there for My Life, and he said, "You're making the piano sound out of tune." Thanks, Dad. And I said, "That's the idea, Pop." You can't explain Elvis Presley to my father. What do you get musically from your old man? Oh, I get the feeling that he don't know rock and roll. Just the Way You Are was a big hit. He called me and said, "You've written better things than that." What do you get from your dad as a dad? As a dad, it's too late. I'm 31. I met him again when I was 23. What can I tell you? I was already me. I knew a lot of kids when I was growing up who were afraid of their fathers. Their fathers beat them up, were bastards, creeps. I was brought up by women. I had to have a nice upbringing. The worst my mother did was grab hangers off the rack and whip me over the shoulders. Your mother, your father, it doesn't matter. That hanger hurts. But I never grew up in fear of men. My mother, she's loving. She's people-oriented. A fucking blast. She is not awed by stardom. She's not a stage mother. Her whole thing was just be happy. And are you happy? Is anything plaguing you? Ooh. A lot of people who are attracted to me haven't been exposed to black music. They think right off the bat that all black music is disco. So they think that my ballads are something to be played only on adult contemporary dentist office easy listening stations. I'm just trying to be accepted for doing a diversity of things. Glass Houses was recently the #1 album in the country. It's Still Rock and Roll to Me was the top single. You can't expect to please everybody. Right. But when the Beatles did Yesterday, did that mean that they became an adult contemporary group? Suitable only for dentist office? No, they didn't stop. That didn't stop them from doing any of the trashy rock and roll stuff they did. Same thing with the Stones. They did Angie and Ruby Tuesday, but it didn't mean they weren't the Stones anymore or had deserted their audience. You know, there's been an evolution in my music. For instance, 52nd Street was a much different album than The Stranger. It had a harder edge, although there was still orchestration on it. But I think people thought we were going to go into a jazz vein in, say, Steely Dan's sense. I was getting hung up on public reaction to my work. But hell, I've got a lot of good friends and success, so what am I complaining about? You know, when you pose with a trumpet on the cover, people might be expecting jazz. Well, you've gotten praised and panned for your studio output. Are you going to attempt a live LP? Actually, we've been taping everything from club dates at the Paradise in Boston to the Spectrum in Philly. Oh, I know where this is going. Dates in Milwaukee and St. Paul, and Madison Square Garden shows too. Thus far, we're doing it simply to document what we do on the road, but it could possibly wind up on a live LP. What you do is too eclectic to be called rock and roll. It is, well, energetic pop. This seems to rile rock critics, and they give you a hard time. Does that bother you? What bothers me is the untruths, the lies, the slander, and the libel. Bad reviews don't bother me, but a lot of these critics are looking for art. I run into this all the time. Robert Hilburn, music critic of the Los Angeles Times, does this all the time, saying in so many words that Billy Joel is not an artist, but a pop star. The thing that got me about that was people who are looking for art in rock and roll or pop are looking for something that either doesn't or shouldn't exist there. An artist is a guy with a beret who sits in a park and paints pictures, and he starves in a garret somewhere. Why must an artist do that to earn the title? Because he's only after art. And art is his special, elitist, intellectual view of how life should be represented on canvas and in music. Now, when you do that consciously, I believe you're really shutting yourself off from what's going on. I do what I do because of radio. Consider Devo. How artistic. What a great concept. De-evolution and industrial rock for the 80s. Intellectually, the whole image of it is very well put together, but it doesn't make it on the radio. If I'm driving in my car, I'd rather hear Donna Summer. That's where it's at. But rock and roll, pop, funk, they can all be so many things, both reflective and reactive. But let's remember the essence of popular music. A song comes on. What do you first hear? Words? Nah, you hear a beat and then a melody. Take My Sharona. If you really like that song, then you took the time to dig out the words, and they're pubescent Dumbo words, but they fit the song. Journalists, for the most part, always tend to tune into a lyric. I've never wanted to print my lyrics on my LP because lyrics are not poetry. They're part of songwriting. They're coloring, and they have to be heard at the same time as the music. If they wrote out the lyrics of all these incredible Motown records, it would be rotten poetry. It's really stupid stuff. The OJs can go, I love you, yes I do. But if they sing it in a particular harmony, do a particular hand jive, it's okay, see? But if Warren Zevon or Neil Young wrote it, it would be, what a dumb lyric. I think it's racism. You're damn straight it's racism. Now, has a great lyric ever defined a great song? Never. I write what I write because I want to hear something else on the radio. I can't stand the Grateful Dead jamming for an hour. I like what I like. Oh, I like what I hear on the jukebox. I like Frank Sinatra, whatever that makes me. I wasn't crazy about the Four Seasons and the Belmonts, or what they call ethnic New York. Now, me and Springsteen are defined this way, like we got gang war going. Bruce is from New Jersey. I'm from Levittown. Like we have any kind of claim to New York? I have no pretensions to Bruce's throne. I have no arguments with Bruce, but we get pitted against each other, right? I know if I sat down with Bruce and talked to him head to head, he would be like, yeah, let's go have a hot dog. Or hey, let me come play on stage at your 100th concert. So what's important to you? I like to play music. We're not in the studio to make important records. We go into the studio, the song gets mixed, and it's eventually heard through tiny car radio speakers. We also like being together on stage. You should never lose sight of the fact that you're there to entertain. People don't pay money to see art. They don't pay money for you to sit there and be Billy Joel. On stage, if Still Rock and Roll to me is probably your most intense, even angry song. Explain what it is you're getting at. New wave songs, it seems, can only be about 2.5 minutes long. That's about it. Only a certain number of instruments can be played on the record. Usually a very few. Usually a very few. Only a certain amount of production is allowed or can be heard. The sound has to be limited to what you can hear in a garage. A return to that sound is all that's going on now. So don't give me any of the new wave using a Farfisa organ because it's so hip. It's just a reaction to a rediscovered past and a rejection of Emerson, Lake, and Palmer using multi-deck synthesizers. You feel pretty strongly about all this, don't you? I grew up on a jukebox music, and everybody in the band has played this music all their lives, and they range in age from 28 to 31. We played the top 40 singles in bars. Then when Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band came out, everybody started smoking pot and tripping and listening to the 13th floor elevator. Suddenly, everything changed. All the formats for playing and recording and listening to music. You could hear 25 minutes of music on the air with no commercial break. Which also rises to the point that no black artist, not the Spinners or the OJs, has been played consistently on FM radio in proportion to the way Hendrix was in the heyday. Elitism is rampant. FM radio cut out black music at the peak of the Al Green era. Thanks for hanging in this long, by the way. I'm in the last column. It's finishing up here. New Wave has the same problem, but the Sex Pistols, God Save the Queen, bored the hell out of me. If I go to a disco and hear one boomps, boomps, boomps tempo all night, I get a headache and split. If I go to a New Wave club and all I hear is, fuck you, and the guy spits on me all night, I'm sorry, I don't like that. If I go to a folk club and all I hear is some girl strumming her guitar singing, give me some wine and cheese, please, I don't want it. I would rather go and hear a good top 40 bar band, which is what we still are, basically. Now, if I'm considered part of that overhyped, overproduced, overindulgent supergroup style, then I'm bummed. But I do admit that some of my earlier albums had that quality. What I'm saying in It's Still Rock and Roll is that I happen to like Donna Summer's hits. I'd never listen to them from the perspective of a Van Halen or a Rush freak who'd blow Donna's brains out with a shotgun simply for being herself musically. That's sick. As for New Wave, I think it's good and necessary. Kick out the Emerson, Lake, Palmer shit and all that overindulgence. Give the whole damned industry an enema. Hey, jam that plastic tube right up its rear end. There's a good mental image for you. In a song like The Stranger, you hint that there are sides to you, deep secrets, little things that even those closest to you aren't aware of. Big things, man. We all have a face. We all have another side. I'm still learning. It never stops. We're all under this pressure. Hey, that'd make for a good song. When were you most frightened of yourself? Right now. What about back in the early 20s when you voluntarily checked yourself into the psychiatric ward of a Long Island hospital because you broke up with your girlfriend and felt lost and alone? No, now. Why now? Because these things I don't know about my image scare the hell out of me. But I just don't have the time to sit around and think about me anymore. I'll go to bed, and my wife and I will try and say to each other, what are you thinking about? And I thinks, I am the knight in shining armor, and I want to go slay dragons. You get to a point in life where there aren't any obvious dragons. When you were in the hospital, were you scared about different things? I was into a real self-pity trip. Oh, gee, I have to face all this shit? Isn't it easier to just cut your throat or slit your wrist? I think anybody goes through that at one time or another, facing adulthood. So I checked into a place where they wouldn't let me kill myself. It was the best thing I ever did. There were all these really sick people, really screwed up. Like in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I said, hey, I'm really okay. These people are really sick. At the end of every concert, you say, don't take any shit from anybody. When did you start doing that? I don't know. Around the same time I started wearing a jacket and tie on stage, about 1977. If you're really good at what you do, you really don't have to take any shit from anybody. But you have to be in a privileged position. It also means not giving any shit to anybody. I really believe it. I love swimming upstream. Well, if you're swimming upstream, there's only one way to do that, and that's by not taking any shit from anybody. All right, thank you, Timothy White. That is a 1980 issue of Rolling Stone where Billy Joel, you could tell he was really angry. All right, so thanks for sticking around till the end. I'm glad you got to hear that. I couldn't find the entire text anywhere online, so hopefully this is going to be fresh on the internet, all right? And so remember, you haven't heard Billy Joel till you've heard Billy Joel completely retold. Have a good day, you guys.